Excel 2016, Chapter 5, pages 300 through 305. All right, you're going to start on page 300 and read about pivot tables. Pivot tables are challenging for the average Excel user. So it's really important that you stop and slow down and read about pivot tables so that you understand what they do. I mean, it's not just enough to click the buttons and follow the book. You need to understand what you're doing. So go ahead and read on page 300 and 301. And then at the bottom of 301, it just warns you, that if you took a break, make sure that you're back into this file, our June sales data, on the sales data worksheet. And you're clicked within your table. Okay? All right. On the tables group, on the ribbon in the Insert tab, let's try that again. Insert tab, then in your tables group, click the Pivot Table button, which is right here, and turn the page. All right, that opens up your Create Pivot Table dialog box. Pay no attention to the fact that my table is named differently than yours. Yours should say your version of June table as you typed it in. Click the New Worksheet option button if necessary. So it says, choose where you want the pivot table report to be placed, and we want it to go in a new sheet because we don't have enough room here. Okay? Go ahead and click the OK button. A new worksheet, Sheet 1, is inserted to the left of the Sales Data worksheet. On the left is the empty pivot table report area where the finished pivot table will be placed. On the right is the pivot table fields task pane which you use to build the pivot table. The pivot table tools tabs, honestly, say that 5 times fast. The pivot table tools tabs appear on the ribbon. Take a look at figure 5-33, and it should look like what you have on your screen. Okay, on the top of page 303, go ahead and read about adding fields to a pivot table. This is going to be challenging during your homework when you're working on the case alone. So make sure right here, right now, you pause this video and you read about adding fields to a pivot table. Okay, at the bottom of page 303, to add fields to the pivot table. In the pivot table fields task pane, drag sales ID from the upper section to the rows area in the lower section. Okay, so over here, okay, we have our pivot table fields. Let's take a look. We've got filters, we've got columns, we've got rows, and we've got values. Okay, so it says to grab sales ID, and by grab it, you just get your mouse on the top of it. You get that 4-headed pronged arrow. You hold down your left mouse button, and you drag it down to rows. Okay, did you see what happened over here when you did that? All right, the sales ID field appears in the rows area, and the unique values in the sales ID field 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 appear in the pivot table report area. Turn the page to see figure 5-35. Okay, on the top of page 304, figure 5-35, stop and take a look at it, paying particular attention to the fact that sales ID is down here in rows. Now, if you missed and you dropped it in filters or threw it someplace else, just grab it and drag it right down to rows, okay? You know what? I shouldn't do this because it'll mess me up, but I'm going to. This is what happens if you drop it. Watch what's happening over here. In the wrong place. You can see that there. Okay? You can see the change here. And this should be in rows. Okay, so when you're doing your case and you have something like that happen and yours isn't looking like the book, when you look at the book and, they've got it running vertically and you've got this horizontally, always check over here because this is probably where you made your error. And that's something to pay attention to for what happens when you start doing your cases on your own. Okay. In the Pivot Tables task pane, click the Amount checkbox. Okay, here's our pivot table fields task pane. Here's amount, and it says to put a check mark right here. So let's do it and watch what happens. Right there. And you'll notice that amount jumped right there. The Sum of Amount button is placed in the Values box because the field contains numeric values. The pivot table groups the items from the June table by sales ID and calculates the total amount for each week. The grand total appears at the bottom of the pivot table. See figure 5-36. So take a look at 5-36, that figure, and make sure, particularly for me, since I started, messing and dropping things around to show you how not to mess up, I want to stop and check and make sure that this says sales ID, that this says sum of amount, and that this matches what's in the textbook. Next, you'll add the sales date and business fields to the pivot table. Step number 3. In the pivot table fields task pane, which is over here, remember, click the sale date checkbox. There's sale date, and there is its checkbox right here. Please don't mistake the down pointing arrow right there for this checkbox. This is right here. The sale date field appears in the rows area. Okay, let's check. Sale date right here, below the sales ID field, and the unique items in the sale date field are indented below each sales ID field item in the pivot table report. Okay, top of page 305. Step number 4. In the pivot table fields task pane, click the business checkbox. Okay, in our pivot table right here, business checkbox. The business field appears in the rows area below the sale date field, and its unique items are indented below the sales ID and the sale date fields already in the pivot table. Okay, so let's take a look at figure 5-37. Take a look and you have checkboxes in the same ones they do. Down here in your rows section, you have sales ID, sale date, and business. And in values, you have sum of amount. Okay, then you're just going to take a quick look, check your screen right here against the figure that they have. Okay, go ahead and stop this video because you're ready to move on to the next one, but you need to read the bottom of page 305 before we can move on.